When I first started filmmaking almost 10 years ago, I would have never believed how far camera technology would come throughout my career. Documenting our planet from the ground and the sky in a full 8K workflow is now a reality. Cinematography for me changed so much when I got my hands on the Ronin 4D from DJI. This camera enables me to take a cinematic, stabilized system into environments where I just could not take a big camera rig. Before the Ronin 4D, I used the Easy Rig with the Ronin 2 and my Red camera, and honestly, since getting the Ronin 4D and seeing how amazing both the quality of the camera is and the stability, it has been with me on almost every single shoot. Throughout this period, I've been using the 6K variant and waiting very patiently for the 8K camera to come out. That time is finally here, and I've had the chance over the last few days to take the camera out into nature and create a few different sequences of beautiful 8K footage to show you what this camera can do. A little breakdown of the specs. We're talking about an 8K sensor that is capable of 60 frames in full resolution, with native ISOs up to 800 and 4000, with a special dynamic range expansion mode that we'll talk about later in the video. We have 9 stops of internal ND filters, 14.7 stops of dynamic range, which is huge amounts of dynamic range. And we have support for autofocus on manual lenses with the LiDAR unit and the manual focus motor. Being able to offer all of this functionality in a small lightweight form factor with 4-axis stabilization is something that you won't see anywhere else in the market. This camera is a truly unique beast, and I'm excited to dive into it in the review. So this is my experience in the field with the X9 8K camera on the Ronin 4D. The first thing that I want to cover is the resolution. We're talking about a 35% increase over the 6K camera. That is huge in allowing for flexibility when working in post-production. Having that 8K sensor allows me to be able to crop in even further than I could before, allowing for example, if I'm doing a movement, maybe I can get 2 shots out of one by cropping in from the 8K wide into a 4K shot. If I'm filming wildlife, maybe I physically can't get closer and I'm restricted with the lens that I have on at the exact time that the behavior unfolds. That is simply a way that I can tell better stories. For me, it just makes sense to have the most resolution that I can when I'm out shooting. The X9 8K camera also allows for me to finally have a full 8K workflow with the DJI Inspire 3. And that is amazing to be able to offer clients a full 8K workflow with a camera that you really trust, both in the air and on the ground. We don't know how the next years of screens will develop, but I would love to be able to capture all of my footage now in 8K. Some shots that I create, I've never been able to do again. So from an investment standpoint, if I'm able to shoot in the highest resolution at the time of shooting, that is just very valuable material for me to own in the future. During our night of camping on the trip, I wanted to test the new native ISOs, which is a little bit lower than the 6K, being 320 and 1600, up to 60 frames per second in 8K. But there is a new dynamic range expansion mode, which enables us to get the original 800 and 4000 native ISOs back, with the limitation of shooting up to 30 frames per second. In this scene, I was documenting my friend cooking dinner over a fire. 30 frames per second was more than ideal to capture that scene, so I was able to do a test between 1600 native and then putting dynamic range expansion on up to 4000 ISO and seeing how those two ISOs compare. And honestly, it's very hard for me to see any difference at all. I'm showing you this with no editing or noise reduction applied. This is just the raw footage. For most of the car tracking sequence, I actually filmed in 800 ISO by accident. I should have been in 320, purely just because I'm so used to seeing the screen show 800 ISO. It's actually quite amazing as a noise test. From my testing, the ISO performance and low light performance is really amazing on this camera. Moving on to frame rates, and the 8K variant offers us a really cool breakthrough in that we can now shoot in 60 frames per second with no crop. And additionally, we can shoot in 4K 120 frames with no crop. With the 6K camera, I used to have to admit defeat and go on a 2.39:1 ratio in order to achieve 60 frames in 6K. When you're shooting in 2.39 ratio, it throws off your compositions in many ways. And I feel like you really have to think in that ratio to get the best shots. And if you're going to be cropping them in afterwards, kind of defeats the purpose. Working back to the idea of 8K workflow from sky to ground, having the Inspire 3 and the Ronin 4D, means we just have now a cleaner workflow across all the different frame rates and shot types that we need on a shoot. With the 8K camera, we're talking about 14.7 stops of dynamic range. I mean, this is so much range to work with. I tried a little test on my car tracking shots to see how far I could push the grade and if the footage would break. And honestly, just like with the Inspire 3 with the 8K, it's so hard to break the footage. I think this is a testament to the amazing color science that DJI has put into this camera. As with the 6K camera, we have 9 stops of internal NDs. This has enabled so many shots for me, just being able to quickly adapt to the different lighting conditions. I don't think I could ever go back. It's just so useful having them in the camera. Using the additional counterweight that DJI offers for the camera, you can put heavier cinema glass on and use a focus motor that attaches on the front to be able to use autofocus on manual lenses. I think that's just another step to being able to bring cinematic looks and cinema glass, but for this first test I just wanted to see how the footage looks, and through that we've used the DL lenses from DJI. So that brings me to the end of my first look at the 8K X9 camera from DJI and the footage that I was able to capture on my trip to the mountains here in Iceland. I hope you've enjoyed this video, and please subscribe to see more from both the 8K camera as well as my adventures in the polar regions. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.